I ran out of gas the other day on my way to the store. And I called my insurance company because I'm just like, yeah, can I get roadside assistance? And they told me, you know what, we're just going to total your car. I guess it was cheaper to just total it and fill up the tank. No, really, but how about the cost of goods and services right now? Is it like crazy or what? Inflation is so crazy that Tom Brady is coming out of retirement. But we're so glad that you were able to afford to make it tonight, because we got a great program planned.
Good.
Now, just want to check, do we have any unauthorized media or trackers in the room? Harry, do you recognize anybody that's been following you around? If they are here, you do not have our permission to record. And just so that the audience, we've gone over this before, so you know how to recognize them. They're usually sitting by themselves. They come on their own, and they'll have like a sport coat on or a jacket, and they have their phone propped up in their pocket. So if you see somebody like that, you can just like stand in front of them and then wave to us, you know, and we'll get somebody to come and remove them from the room.
We don't have to do that. You already know what's going on.
Yeah. So our county and state conventions are over, and we elected Christina Caramo, and that's the power of precinct delegates. You know how we've been all working on this precinct delegate project for like 5 years? This is the fruit of our labor, guys. So thank you so much.
Amen.
I hope it all makes sense now, doesn't it? So we know the establishment, the big money families in the state are not happy about our selections. They're just like, you know what, these are Trump endorsed candidates. They don't like that. They don't like the state, representative candidates, and we knew they were going to backlash. So how did they backlash? You guys know? Yeah. Of course. They took Matt Maddock out of caucus. Is Matt in the room? Are you in this room, Matt? He is here, but anyway, you know, I just can't say enough for, you know, his courage to stand up for the Trump candidates, and, you know, what it's cost him. But, you know, we need to keep moving forward and supporting these people. The big money families are not going to support our candidates, so it's going to be up to us to get them across the finish line. Okay, so I want you all to mark your calendars for a really special night. First off, who here has heard of the movie 2,000 Mules? Okay, so wouldn't it be so exciting to see Catherine Engelbreit and Greg Phillips? Yeah. Okay, so we're bringing them in. It's May 19th. We're not showing the entire movie. We're going to be showing excerpts from Dinesh D'Souza's movie, and we're going to be supplementing that with actual Dropbox video that has been pulled out of all the Dropbox, you know, and it's like terabytes. I don't know, like 10 terabytes of video in Detroit. Higher, 20 terabytes, 1,000,000 terabytes. Anyway, people are at this moment probably still reviewing video, finding these nuggets of fraud, and we're going to incorporate this never seen before videos of the drop boxes in Detroit. So you're going to want to get your ticket for this, because I think that Catherine and Greg are probably the hottest people in the country right now. I feel so fortunate that they agreed to come in. It's going to be at the Polish American Cultural Center. General tickets are $45 and $85 for VIP, which will include VIP, open bar, and appetizers. And that will be through the night, at least the bar will be. All proceeds are going to go to help Christina Caramo. So it's really worthwhile. Plus, like, who wouldn't want to see these two? To me, they are, Catherine is like a national hero. It's like what she has given up in her personal life to come up with this evidence is just like incredible to me. So you can go to either Christina Caramo's website for tickets, or you can wait and I'll send out the information through the Lakes Area Tea Party. I wanted to make a couple suggestions about 2,000 Mules because it's very important that we get this message out about this movie. Of course, they're going to try to bury it. And I was like Democrat incumbent Governor Gretchen Whitmer in November's election. Perry is one of the last to join the race, but he's made quite a splash with his advertising blitz. Perry's campaign has begun holding interactive events around the state focused on education and election security. Perry shook things up originally by endorsing Matt DePerno when he first got into the race, and he challenged other candidates to do the same. He was also outspoken about supporting Secure My Vote in order to tighten up our voter ID laws. He joins us tonight so we can learn a bit more about his campaign. So please give a warm welcome to Perry Johnson.
Well, I am one fellow that doesn't care whether or not there is anybody in the room recording. It doesn't matter, because I will lay the cards on the table. You are looking at a full spectrum conservative in every possible way. I am conservative fiscally, socially, America First conservative. I believe in pro-life. I am pro-Trump, and I believe we have the greatest country in the world, and I want to keep it that way. I'm going to ask you all, doesn't it feel great to be an American?
Yes.
You know, I come from a middle-class family. My father was a pilot in World War II, and my mother was a nurse in the Army WACs. They met in Europe at a New Year's Eve party. That was the single biggest break of my life, or I wouldn't be here today. They loved this country. And so from the very first day I was born, my parents told me that one of the greatest gifts you could have in the world is to be born an American. And in America, it's the land of opportunity. They told me you can be anything you want. Now, we didn't have a lot of money. In fact, we were, like most people in America, out there trying to do our best. And despite the fact that they didn't have very much money, I had probably one of the greatest childhoods on the planet. I had so much fun, I can't stand it. One of my favorite times was when we would go out fishing with my dad. We'd catch the fish and then we'd eat it right afterwards. And I'm going to ask you, is there anything in this world that tastes better than the fish right after you catch it? I had one of my greatest, most exciting moments when I was in 8th grade, and I got my 21st merit badge and became Eagle Scout, and I was very proud of myself. It was wonderful. I went to a Catholic school, and I was taught by nuns. So when somebody says that I'm pro-life, I'm pro-life. I'm that way because that's what I believe in my heart and soul. And it's been part of my being all my life. And it will always be part. My son, as a matter of fact, who is going to college next year, was the only person in his entire class group that was pro-life out of literally 24 kids in that group. And when I heard that, it made me sick. My son was taking a course in critical race theory, teaching They taught him that the United States was formed in the 1600s on the back of slaves. And they demonized people like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, all of our founding fathers. The reality of life is, I think we had the greatest founding fathers, and I'm a guy that believes in the Constitution. And I believe we should follow the Constitution. And I believe that there are certain things that are critical in the Constitution, among them, the Second Amendment. Because never forget, the government is a government by the people. And it is a government by the people, for the people, and we have to keep it that way. Now, we have a very interesting situation with our governor, because our governor campaigned on fix the damn roads, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Go down my road.
think about how nutty it is. In 2019, she does nothing, even though that was her main campaign promise. And then when COVID hit, there was never a better opportunity in the history of humankind to fix the road than when nobody was on them. And she still didn't do it. Now, I'm going to ask you one simple question before I go any further. Who would you rather have as president, Biden or Trump?
You know I'm right.
Think about this. We have a president right now who's trying to shake a hand. Only he can't find the hand. Now,
I know.
when I say I'm pro-Trump, you have to realize I'm pro-Trump because this is a man who has done so much for our country.
Amen.
And what we need is to keep America the greatest country in the world. And that's why I'm running for governor. Now, a little bit about my history. I had a tough time in college. My parents couldn't afford to send me to college, but I worked during the summer and I got through. And grad school was pretty tough. In fact, I was getting eviction notices on a pretty regular basis. I had my gas shut off a few times, but I got through that too. And it's America, so you can do anything you want, be anything you want. And I finally got a job at Borg Warner in the auto industry. Now, that was a time when the auto industry was really struggling. The Japanese had come in the 80s.
Sure.
With tremendous quality. I don't know whether any of you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
But they had phenomenal quality, and they were killing us. Back then, what we used to do was to look at our product at the end of the line, and we had inspection teams. And when the quality was bad, we would either rework the part or throw it out. Well, there are two problems with that. One, it's very expensive. You have all that labor in. And number two, the biggest problem is you're never going to get any better. But I knew how to solve the problem. What we did was to go into the front of the operation, starting right at the beginning, and iron out the variation. And I introduced statistical process control. We used SPC, and we gave the line workers a tool to use so that they could see when changes were being made. And little by little, our line personnel made the operation better and better, till in about 4 or 5 years, we had the best quality in the world. Now, while this is going on, I saw that quality was going to be a big thing. In fact, we have somebody here from Crosby who was big on quality back then. And I wrote a book on quality. It's a quality standard. We have a standard for this chair, for the table, for everything we have. And I said, why not a standard for quality? I wrote a book on ISO 9000, the quality standards. It took off like hotcakes. In fact, they translated it into Spanish, Japanese, even Hungarian. And it ignited my company. And today, Perry Johnson Registrars and Perry Johnson Laboratory Accreditation operate in 61 countries around the world. Now, I live the American dream. I admit it. I have 3 wonderful kids. My oldest one's going to college next year. And I have the most wonderful wife on the planet right here with me. She evaluates my speech every night, and she rates it depending on how many times I jump up. And it is time for me to give something back to this great state and this great country. And that's why I'm running for governor.
God bless you.
I'm not going to take a salary. I'm funding my own campaign. I'm not answering to anyone. The reality of life is that we need to make this a better state. And I'm going to ask you a simple question. Do we have quality in this state today?
Hell no.
Let's talk about first item, quality elections. Do we have quality elections?
No.
Now, first item is we need photo ID with signature verification. Is that unreasonable? When we have an absentee ballot, I want to make sure the person exists. So they have to request it in writing.
Right.
So we are going to have only ballots mailed out absentee if they're requested in writing.
Exactly.
And we have to be able to audit when the polls don't match. Let's give us quality elections.
Amen.
Now let's talk about quality energy. You understand, when we had Biden take office, the first thing he did was to stop all new drilling on public lands. Then he said, I'm going to have all these rules that the small producer has to follow. In fact, I'm going to make these rules so onerous that they can never make any money if they produce their oil. And that's what happened. So you wonder why we can't produce enough oil for this country, let alone export. It's because of the administration. And it's common sense. When you have an abundance of oil, the price is low. Remember when it was $2?
Yeah.
It was under $2. It was what, $1.50? $1.30? And then they said, oh, we don't want that. We want you paying as much as possible. In fact, you know what Gretchen does? She makes sure you pay so much money you can't stand it. Because she has 2 taxes on top of that. So when you go to the pump, we're one of the only states in the entire country that has 2 gas taxes. We pay 27.2 cents for one tax plus a 6% tax. And when we tried to stop that in the Senate, in the House, and we put the Senate and the House put that bill, she vetoed it because she wants you paying as much as possible. She campaigns that we're going to reduce taxes, and she taxes everybody. Now, the reality of the matter is that we need to get that Line 5 always moving. We can't shut it down. It supplies 55% of the propane for the entire state. It supplies over 5 million gallons per day of gasoline. We have to stop anything that would ever inhibit Line 5 from existing. So the lawsuit has to be stopped, and we have to continue the tunnel. You know they want to build a tunnel that will secure it 100 feet. By the way, it's being paid for by Enbridge, the company. They're paying for it. It costs us nothing. If they really were concerned with the environment, wouldn't they say, hey, we want that tunnel underground? No, they stop it. I didn't jump that high. So we have to recognize that we have to do everything we can to get that pipeline going. So the Keystone Pipeline should get going. We can bring oil prices down, and we can start paying $1.50, $2 per gallon. How many are in favor of that?
Amen.
Now let's take a look at schools. We need quality schools.
Yes.
Do you realize that right now, in the state of Michigan, that only 29% of our people in grades 3 through 8, 29% of the students can pass the M-Step?
That's just ridiculous.
Only 32% are proficient in reading and writing at their grade level. Now, I'm going to give you a real sad statistic. Do you know that under the other administration, Snyder, in 2013 and 15, Michigan students in high school were number 3 in the country in SAT scores. Number 3. Last year, they were 49 out of 50. The second worst state in the entire country. Now, is that quality?
Hell no.
I asked myself, how is this possible that we still have this governor in office? But we do. Now let's take a look at taxes. How many people like really high taxes? The reality is nobody likes high taxes except our governor. Now, we have a tax rate of 4.25%. We collect about $11.5 billion in taxes each year off of that 4.25%. We make no effort to reduce it. We have to try to get it down to 0. Now I'm going to tell you an interesting tidbit. Do you know that our governor spent $8.5 billion by sending unemployment checks to the wrong people?
Yeah, I remember that.
Do you know that she spent another $2.5 billion by sending fraudulent checks in Medicaid to the wrong people, that adds up to $11 billion, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing
How do you recover
that she can do all this and still there, right? Now, one thing we have to recognize is that we have the power to change things. We can do it all. And we are a state that has a fabulous history. We played a huge role in World War II. As a result of World War II, we ended the war so decisively and quickly because of the people on the assembly line, building the tanks, building the airplanes, building the armaments right here in Michigan. What about 1914? We had a fellow by the name of Henry Ford who had the simple idea of the assembly line. Instead of moving the people from one spot to the next, he decided we're going to move the line. What he did changed manufacturing forever around the world. Pretty soon everybody used that assembly line, but something happened then. Because he became more efficient, he was able to raise the wage from $2.25 a day to $5 a day. Instantaneously, we became the wealthiest middle class in the history of all humanity. People could afford a home, a car, and live a great life. The middle class was the greatest middle class in the history of the world. We were the mecca of the middle class. We were a great state, the greatest state in the Union, and people flocked here from all over the world. Can you imagine how wonderful it would be if we could have that again? Can you imagine how wonderful it would be if we had quality schools, quality elections, quality water, quality roads, and a quality of life that brought everyone to Michigan? By golly, we could be the greatest state in the Union again. Let's do it. Let's make Michigan be all it can be. God bless Michigan. God bless the United States. And God bless Donald Trump. Let's do it.
Thank you, Terry Johnson. Thank you so much for joining us for excellence in broadcast journalism. Michael has spoken to hundreds of events, both nationally and internationally, including Australia, Europe, Africa, Canada, and the Philippines. Tonight, Michael will propose his reasons for believing division in our country is necessary and the only peaceful outcome for a nation so divided over issues involving morality. So please give a warm welcome to Michael Voris.
Much. Good evening, everybody. How are you?
Good.
I first wanted to say, just do a little poll. How many of you are familiar with Channel 2, WJBK TV here? All right, that's where I was, and I won 4 Emmys here in Michigan. How many of you heard of the Hall of Shame?
Yeah.
I started that. So it's kind of, I just started here in this market. I'm sorry, in the country, but I just started here in this market. I was, some of you may remember that Channel 2 used to be a CBS affiliate way back in the day, and then in 1995, in that great big giant switch over of a lot of CBS stations to Fox, becoming a Fox affiliate, I was at Channel 2 at that time. So just a little brief history for you. I have been studying and reporting on politics for almost my entire career. I got my start in the political world when I graduated from Notre Dame. I went to CBS News in New York and started working on, my first job was Campaign 84, Reagan-Mondale. So, Reagan-Mondale, the great days. So I started working and doing in the polling unit for the election unit, national election, and all of that. So I've been around politics. That's just a way to tell you I've been around politics my entire career. And in my interest, I worked for Reagan when I was a student at Notre Dame my sophomore year in the 1980 campaign. So I've been around the scene for quite a while. So one of the things I'd like to really sort of zero in on is this one particular thing. you will see constantly polling talking about unity and the country's not unified and it's 50-50 this or 55-45 the other. And it has always struck me as the decades have gone by, who cares? Like this is some great thing that the country has to be unified. The left, Marxists, let's call them what they are, communists, have been at work for 100 years to create this current climate that we're in. But not as a stopping point, but as a kind of a point of origin, where they now have the scales almost at kind of an even tip. So half the country believes this crazy stuff, and the other half of the country believes this crazy stuff. And I will tell you that when it comes to political polling, one of the things that you really want to be clued in on is not just 50% think this and 50% think that, but when you burrow down to sort of the next layer of questions, you want to know how much does each side believe its position strongly. That's the thing. And you will see, and I've been watching this now for decades in my career, you will see whatever the issue is, doesn't matter, funding of Planned Parenthood, abortion, gay marriage, whatever you want to call it, you start to see on those two extremes, which really aren't so extreme anymore, you start to see the intensity level really ramp up. And it is those two sides, the very opposed or very in support of, those are your trendsetters. Everybody else in the middle, which is shrinking on almost every issue, everyone else in the middle are the people who either don't go vote or really can't sort of make up their mind or are sort of the wishy-washy crowd. So the question of unity as some sort of good in itself is an absurd notion. It's completely absurd. And yet political leaders in both parties, but particularly in the Republican Party establishment, are constantly going on about unity. Well, let's talk about this particular aspect, shall we? You can't unify around a lie.
Amen.
And that's what's being proposed to you. And it doesn't matter what the particular lie is, establishments in both parties, although I won't talk about Democrats so much because that's just a flood of lies, and the only separation they have is just in strategy. The left, the communists, never disagree amongst themselves on their worldview. There's never disagreement on that. The only thing they might have a variance of opinion on is, should we push this bill through right away, or should we wait a year, or whatever. But none of them disagree with the content of the bill. But when you come over to the right, whatever that means, there's all sorts of different worldviews on things. For example, and you don't need to do a show of hands or something, but there are probably people here, I'm presuming everybody here except for the few moles that the Democrats have sitting amongst you, I'm presuming everybody here would count themselves as sort of a solid Republican base, right?
Yeah.
That's why you're here on the only nice day we're ever going to have in Michigan, till next spring. We're all here to talk about this very thing, about unifying and getting behind this candidate or that candidate or this cause or whatever. And yet, even amongst ourselves, here in this room and outside of here, people who would be here, or at least are here in ideological spirit, there are all kinds of major disagreements. All kinds of major disagreements. And I'm not talking about policies, whether we should build a pipeline or do this. I mean, yeah, of course, those sorts of things have to be discussed. It's not only the proper role of government, it's really the only role of government. But when you get to the heart of the issues, the things that touch people where they live, there's never any disagreement among the communists. There's tons of disagreement on this side. And if you remember back when Bill Clinton won in '92, very shortly after the election, after he was sworn in January of '93, Haley Barbour, who was the governor of Mississippi, Republican governor of Mississippi, said, we Republicans need to stop talking about all of these values issues. We need to start talking about, the economy. So everybody remembers back in '92, it's the economy, stupid. So the Republican, he was chairman of the Republican National Committee, because obviously Republicans are out of power, so they elected him and he's the head Republican for the party. The Republican Party establishment sent out the clarion call, you must abandon social issues. They're losers. The public doesn't care about them. That's the message that has been drilled into us now for 30 years. And the whole issue of the election integrity question. I mean, where does that come from? That's a moral issue.
Yes.
That's a moral issue. You had your vote stolen from you. And we're not allowed to talk about that. Why aren't we allowed to talk about that? Oh, because we, sitting in Republican, Mount Olympus, have deigned that that's a loser issue. It's a non-starter with the public. That there is barely a poll that you can cite that doesn't say election integrity across the board with Americans is not a driving issue. Of course it is more so with Republicans, because they're the ones that got screwed in 2020. But lots of people, we were just doing a live shot for our Church Militant website out there, back to our evening news, and looked up a couple numbers. In January 2021, on January 6th, 37% of Americans, ABC News poll, 37% of Americans said they had some trust that the election was, election integrity was secure. First of all, that's only a third, but still, it was 37%. Fast forward a year to this year, January 6th, 20%. It dropped. So somewhere around 80% of the country has questions, at least questions, about the integrity of elections. Over half of Americans think Joe Biden's in office because there was some sort of nefarious something that went on. The other half are on drugs. So the question is, why has the Republican Party leadership been able to dictate to you your degree of moral consciousness? They never have a problem with it over on the Democratic side. Why? Because they're completely unified around a lie. And because they're unified around a lie, they're not playing a game with different rules. They're playing a different game. You're all sitting here because you got screwed 2 years ago. Almost 2 years ago. That's why you're here. And you're getting screwed again. First you got screwed by the Democrats, and then you got screwed by the Democrats' subprime called Republican leadership. And that's why you're here. And now comes the unpleasant part. sorry. Why are you able to be exploited? Because you are exploited.
You allow it because you allow it.
You allow it because there is way too much divergence in your philosophical view of the world among you. The Democrats have a very clear, single-minded philosophical point of view when they look at the world. And it is that you are expendable and their elites get to control everything. There is no God, there is no morality, other than to the degree that it can be used to accomplish whatever their goal is. They'll all be God bless you, to crack up when I hear Obama, God bless you.
Yeah.
You don't believe in God, you bastard. Complete unity over here, unity around a lie that rejects God, rejects divinity, thinks heaven is here on earth, and then you die and you turn into worm food. That's their view of the world. That's why babies can be killed by the tens of millions, because who gives a crap? Their life is no more meaningful than yours. You just managed to escape the vacuum cleaner with the razor blades on the end of it. But on this side over here, there are all kinds of competing philosophical views of the world. You don't have to do a show of hands, but I would venture to say that there are some people in here who are completely down with gay marriage. I bet there are people in here who are perfectly fine with contraception, the gateway drug to abortion. I bet there are people in here, this room, who think in some cases maybe abortion is kind of okay and I sort of understand it. How on earth, in the face of this behemoth completely unified around a lie, do you think you're ever going to make any kind of advancement when you can't even agree amongst yourselves? That's the problem, and that's why you're easily exploited. How many of you here wore masks everywhere you went if you needed to go to the grocery store to eat? How many of you not put your hands up? How many of you did? How many of you went along with any of that stuff? Don't raise your hands. You can't look at the left and be damning them when you're giving them the ammo to come after you. And that's what you've done. That's what Republican rank and file have done. Now, why are there different points of view, philosophical points of view? Because the confrontations that needed to happen way back when Haley Barbour said in 1992, we're not going to talk about social issues anymore, we need to talk about economic ones. Because most people who were Republican voters were perfectly fine with that. And that became the unraveling of the rank and file. Even Donald Trump doesn't oppose gay marriage. Be careful who you pick for your heroes. Just because somebody opens the door to a whole new thing to begin doesn't mean everything that happens with that person is fine. When we talk about the differences, there has been a decided lack of confrontation within the Republican rank and file that needed to happen 30 years ago. And now we're all paying the price for it. It's like the battered wife who just keeps going back. It's like the alcoholic dad who no one in the family ever really wants to confront the issue. So they just kick the can down the road. It's why the Republican rank and file in state after state keeps electing people who most recently in Congress looked at that 2020 election and certified it. You can't pick and choose the areas that we agree on and simply ignore and refuse to confront the ones that is where everything is decided. Who cares if everything in the household is fine if dad comes home drunk and beats the hell out of mom? But nobody wants to talk about it because it'll upset all the other stuff we have going on. There's no ranking of importance of issues. The GOP leadership is completely fine with simply winning.
Yeah.
What they do with their win, that's why we're all sitting here tonight. Did they represent you?
No.
Did anybody in that Michigan House or Senate, when Giuliani was sitting there with I call her the crazy lady, I like her, the blonde-haired lady who was down there watching all the stuff, and she's like, I watched all the cheating, I was on contract for Dominion. And the whole Republican leadership there on that panel were just like, That's what, but they're rhinos because they have the power that you have given them. They have ripped you off. And they have ripped you off because you are rippable, offable, because you will not confront the issues amongst yourselves. There is no unity. I don't care if the Democrats, the communists, if there's a clear line of demarcation between them and us. Good. That's how it's going to be on the last day. It's called the sheep and the goats. But not everybody who's standing on thinking they're standing on the sheep side is going to be a sheep. Even the Son of God himself said, not everybody who says, Lord, Lord, is going to get into my Father's house. We, as a party, have refused to confront each other over the most basic issues of humanity, which is not whether we keep a gas pipeline going or if the price of gas is $5 a gallon. All of that is the symptoms. Those are the tumors of what happens when we fall down and nature abhors a vacuum, so therefore the communists move in. Everything that is happening here now in 2022 is happening because nobody confronted the issues that needed to be confronted. Why weren't people storming the school board saying, damn it, we want to pray in our school? Oh, honey, don't do that. Now's not the time. Jane and Mark over there, they'll get all bothered if we do that. You realize you're fighting for your souls.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
I'm not talking about the soul of a party. The world will pass away.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, the world's gone. I'm talking about you're fighting for your eternal salvation, whether you're going to be saved or damned. And anybody who sits in the room believes you're already saved, you're out of your mind. You're out of your mind. If you haven't beat those streets out there, if you haven't confronted people, and I mean confronted people, who think child slaughter, or contraception, or the hookup culture, or, well, my son's gay, so I'm kind of okay with that. I don't like it, I wish he wasn't, but really you think you're going to stand in front of God and just get ushered into heaven after going along with the culture of death in whatever form it has presented itself in your environment? Nobody's saved until God says you're saved at your personal judgment. In the meantime, you have to merit your salvation. And you do that by loving God and loving your neighbor. How is it the Republicans are so confrontation avoidance? Did you see anything going on in front of Brett Kavanaugh's house over the weekend? Why does the left never have a problem with confronting? because they are completely unified and they are intense. They are devoted to that lie. But because there's all sorts of varying things here, and I'm not really quite sure, and I don't know, and my philosophy is a little off, and it kind of disagrees with them, but we shouldn't say it. Well, all that's important is we just elect a Republican to this seat. A Republican who's a phony Christian? A Republican who goes along with, certifying an election? A Republican who signs his or her name to $500 million again going to Planned Parenthood? Now, there's no way to do this, there's no way to win without stepping back and thinning the herd. It's not possible. You cannot have fake unity in the face of real unity and expect that you're going to win. That's why you guys are here, because you understand that the calls for unity from the establishment ring very hollow, because they're interested in power, and they're interested in their largesse and their pockets and their influence and their lobbying dollars if they get voted out and all the stuff. That's all they're interested in. They'll have power, but they'll never do anything with it. And you're here because you're like, you know what, we need to get power back. But what are you going to do with it? Your people get elected, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to storm the Capitol in Lansing and demand that that bill that Whitmer has put in place to lock down abortion here in Michigan? What are you doing about that? Anybody here set up a website? You, not somebody else, not one of the organizers. Have you set up a website? Have you changed your life in order to fight for the moral good? Because if you haven't, it's a little hypocritical to point at the establishment. You have to change your life. If you like collecting stamps, well, that was nice, but this is no longer the era for stamp collecting. You probably love golf. You know, when the empire is crumbling, the soldiers pick up their swords and their shields, not their golf clubs. You will never find any sort of complacency or lack of intensity over here with the communists. You talk about a dedicated group, absolutely dedicated, because who powers them is Satan, who never rests, who never sleeps, who never takes a vacation. In my days as a reporter, I used to cover all kinds of various conferences of all sorts of things down at what obviously used to be called Kobo and a bunch of other places. I was always struck, first of all, I hated the assignment. I think my news director didn't like me, so he kept sending me these leftist things I had to go cover. I was always struck, though, it's always good, you can always learn something from your enemies. Their intensity, their organization, their foresight, their plan, all of it was so incredibly well laid out, so well thought through, all of it. There was like nothing left not thought about, not planned, because they're all dedicated to the lie. Some of you who are Catholic will recognize the name Archbishop Fulton Sheen. He had a wonderful statement. His statement was, the communists have no truth and all zeal, and we, who's meaning Catholics, and we have all truth and no zeal. Can't be organized around disunity. You can't pretend that, hey, here's 100 things, 18 of these we agree on, so now let's move forward. Why don't you disagree, why do you disagree on these other 82? Well, we just won't talk about that. That is your weakness. That you will not talk about the things that need to be talked about. Our blessed Lord did not get crucified and die because he never said anything and never caused division. It is precisely because he caused division that they killed him. Even within his own people, it was, as Pilate brilliantly noted, I'm no Jew. It is your own nation and chief priests that handed you over to me. The idea that we get to ignore the things that separate us is a falsehood. It's a golden idol. And it has now come back in spades because too many people who are allowed to call themselves Republicans, and I'm not talking about just the people who got elected, them too. But within the ranks, too many people were perfectly fine to say, I'm just not going to get into the whole gay marriage thing. I just don't agree that we should get into that. Are you crazy?
Yep.
We're not going to talk about, well, maybe abortion should be, These things are evil.
Yeah.
They are wicked. They're from the pits of hell. They're conjured up in the mind of Satan, the enemy of humanity, who despises us, every single one of us, from the moment we're conceived. And somehow we think ignoring those things and concentrating on a few things we happen to agree with is a winning strategy. It's not a winning strategy. It's a loser every time. You can never ignore the truth and expect to turn out for the good. No matter how painful the truth is to look at, no matter how hard it is to have to deal with, no matter how many friendships or relationships have to break apart, hopefully the people that leave you, if you're standing for the truth, hopefully if they leave you, they'll come to their senses and come back. In the meantime, you don't get to consort with them. To get somebody elected who's a compromise. Who's a compromise? Who are you compromising with? You're compromising with evil. So the Democrats are pushing America over the cliff, breaking the speed limit. While Republicans are sitting over here plodding along at the speed limit. You're both going the same place, over the cliff. The fact that one happens to get there first, who cares? You have within your hands right now the power to begin to turn this around. But you can't exercise that power if there is division among you on anything. All of that has to be gone. There's no division over here between AOC and Nancy. It's a tactical difference. When Obama sits there and goes, well, I sort of came around to gay marriage. My position evolved. Really? What was your objection before, Obama? You really had some sort of like stirring of the soul that something disturbed you about this? Holy crap, your wife's a man anyway. So what was the big conscience dilemma? When we started Church Militant in 2006, one of the things we did was start talking about politics and concentrated on the 2008 campaign. And when Obama was still just a state senator, and I'm still not quite sure how he managed to get elected when he wasn't born here, but I'm sorry. So I don't know if that's true or not. It is. He always had this, I've evolved and that's about my pay grade. And what is different about him today than was different back in 2008 when he was running? Absolutely nothing. It was a tactical decision to not push something too far. When the Obergefell decision was reached in front of the Supreme Court in 2015, I was standing on the steps of the court covering it for Church Militant. And a day or two later, Joe Biden got up and said, to a room full of Jews, he said, Well, I told the president we didn't have to worry about this. We didn't have to push any legislation. You all would take care of this. Hollywood would get people to accept gay marriage. Will and Grace sort of greased the skids for it. You Jews running Hollywood made it all happen. That's what he said. They have never thought anything other than their wicked design from the beginning. What did our blessed Lord tell the Jewish leaders about Satan? He was a liar and a murderer from the beginning. You can't go along with that in any way, shape, or form at all and expect that God is going to reward you somehow in the next life, and somehow things will turn around for you in this life, politically speaking, culturally speaking. How many of you have children or grandchildren that are sitting in school right now who are hearing it's okay to have anal sex from their weird-ass teacher? That's what's going on. That's what's going on. 6-year-olds are being taught about masturbation. Why? Because good people shut their mouths because of contraception. They wanted to contracept. They wanted to have just a little bit of the evil. It's manageable. I'll open up Pandora's box and just let one demon out real quick. Doesn't work like that. That philosophy doesn't work over here. On the communist side, they take it all. You can't take a little bit of evil and expect that things are going to be okay. But that's what we've done. And now here we are on the brink of America descending into non-existence. Because when the time came to stand up and fight, too many people, good Republicans, had their fingers in the pie of evil, taking out just their little portion. Do you know a majority of Republicans believe gay marriage is fine? 67%. 2 out of every 3 people who identify as a Republican voter think gay marriage is fine. There's 120 of you or whatever in the room. I'd be shocked if everybody in here was opposed to it. What about the kids? When Dave Rubin posts pictures of him and his perverted lover holding pictures of their little babies that they've rented a womb for in utero, here they are, there's these 2 little babies in here. Where did those babies come from? They came from IVF. Do you know in order to have an IVF baby, you have to kill 3, 5, 6, 12 others? There's a selection process that goes on. You can't accept that and say you believe in Christ. How's that different from abortion? You're killing a life before it's born. See, none of these things have ever been talked about because we don't talk about these things in polite company, do we? Republicans go to the country club, they sit around and they just talk about how to get power back from the Democrats and then do nothing with it. Now it's up to you. And it is the 11th hour. Make no mistake here. It is the 11th hour. They stole an election from you. They put a walking corpse into the Oval Office. They put a racist, rhymes with witch, into the vice presidency. This was allowed to happen. They didn't take power away from you. They realized your weak spot and they seized it. Nobody can be manipulated unless there is something inside you manipulable. And they've realized what that is. And what that is your own personal embrace of the culture of death. Not across the board, but just enough to be able to extract from you what they wanted. You cannot participate in evil and expect a good outcome in this life or the next. Now's the time. You need to walk out of this room when you leave here tonight. You need to do some deep, deep gut check, soul searching, and say, what do I have to do now? God, I'm sorry. I participated in this culture, even if it was this much. They participate this much in the culture of life. So things have been mingled together, and that's how they got to where we are right now. You should not be sitting here on a nice spring night wondering about how to save your state. You should be out enjoying things with your children and your grandchildren, but you're not. And you think it's going to somehow get better by just sort of doing the things we've been doing, refusing to confront, refusing to look in the mirror. It's not going to get better. The devil doesn't work like that. Thank you very much.
Bring it, you did. Thank you so much. Okay, we're gonna wrap it up.